look, I just love this movie, okay? Can we move on? Okay. Sorry.
I would make you murdered. All you'll ever be.
Hello again, everyone. This is a special little video that I'm doing. I've been challenged by certain YouTube friends of mine to make a video where I list my favorite movies from every year since the year I was born. So, for one thing, I'm going to be outing myself. I am 43 years old. I was born in 1978. So I'm going to be covering movies from 1978 until 2022, which is this year. Every single year I'm going to list one favorite movie. The challenge was to list general favorites, but for me, since this channel is devoted almost exclusively to science fiction, I'm going to talk about science fiction movies. Now, a couple of rules. One, like I said, only one movie every single year. No matter how difficult that choice has been, I have picked just one. This was very difficult. There were some years where it was really, really hard to pick just one. It was almost Sophie's Choice level. But as a general rule, how I decided I would pick my movies would be to say, which of these movies would I be most likely to just want to watch? Granted, that did weigh things a little bit more towards the entertainment side of the equation instead of like the artistic side of the equation, but we're here talking about favorites, not best, not most artistic, favorites. And my interpretation is, these are the movies I just love to watch. So like I said, there will be some years where I will be omitting some great movie that everybody loves, that even I love, but there was just one other movie that I love a little bit more in terms of how I just decide to watch it. I also want to just give you a sentence or two. I'm not going to go in depth on each and every movie or else we'll be here all day. I figure if I do like 10 seconds on each movie, that's what, 430 seconds? I can't do math right now. How many minutes is that? I don't know. That's like 7 minutes maybe. And that's a good length. I don't want this to be like a 20-minute long video, right? There's one other rule. That rule is I'm going to try to stick to science fiction, like strictly to science fiction. Like there's a lot of sci-fi movies that straddle two sides. Like you got science fiction and action, or science fiction and romance. And those kind of movies I'm not completely avoiding. I'm just going to try to steer a little bit clearer of them. The one exception being sci-fi horror, because I just can't avoid sci-fi horror. If you've watched my channel long enough, you know it's probably my favorite mixed genre. So, with that in mind, we're going to start in 1978. Now, I didn't do the whole year. I did just after I was born, which is only like 2 months because I was born in early November. But even if I hadn't decided that, after looking at the whole list of every movie that was released in 1978, I would probably still pick the same movie. And that movie is Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. This is my favorite of all the Body Snatcher movies. I'm not going to get too much into it because I've already done a video on it, so I don't feel the need to talk anymore about it. For 1979, yet another movie I've already done a video on, that's Alien, which is actually a very recent video I did. Please go check it out. I mean, come on, it's Alien. What more do I have to say? In the same vein, 1980, The Empire Strikes Back. Now, like I said, this was a very hard year, and I want to list all of my runner-ups, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell you what my runner-ups were. You'll just have to use your imagination. Because The Empire Strikes Back has to win. I mean, come on, it's the best Star Wars movie. Who doesn't agree to that? 1981, Escape from New York. Yet another movie I've done a video on, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. 1982, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the best Star Trek movie. You can't argue against that. 1983, War Games. This is a movie that I grew up really loving, and the whole idea of a computer deciding that there's no way to win a global thermonuclear war. I mean, come on, it's such an 80s thing, and I love it. I love everything about that movie. And one day I will do a video on it. I've got a copy of it over here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. War Games. 1984. Now, this one might be a little controversial when I call this science fiction, but I do consider this movie science fiction, and that is Ghostbusters. Yes, I consider Ghostbusters science fiction. Not because I think ghosts are real, but because they use the tools of science in a universe where ghosts are real. And it does have a lot to say about science in kind of an off way. Like, it's not teaching you anything about real science, but it is teaching you It's not really teaching you anything. It's Ghostbusters. Look, I just love this movie, okay? Can we move on? 1985, Real Genius. I love this movie. My wife loves this movie, and I will make a video on this movie someday. Yeah, it's just a great movie. And the soundtrack is Tears for Fears. I mean, come on, what 80s kid doesn't love that? 1986, Aliens. Come on, Aliens. I just talked about Alien being one of the greatest science fiction horror movies of all time, if not the greatest. Aliens is more of a science fiction action. I mean, the horror is definitely still there. It still scared the pants off of me when I was a kid, but it's really a Vietnam movie if you really, really want to get down to it. But still, Aliens, great movie. 1987, Spaceballs. Yes, it's a spoof. Yes, it's a comedy, but who doesn't love Spaceballs? I've watched Spaceballs a million times. My son even likes Spaceballs. He and I quote it to each other all the time. Great movie. 1988, Akira. This is the movie that introduced most of us to anime, myself included, and it still stands up as one of the best. It might not be the best. There are some animes I like even more, but this one, out of all the science fiction movies of 1988, is the one that sticks with me the most. So yeah, Akira. 1989, Back to the Future Part 2. Now you might be wondering why I don't have Back to the Future Part 1 on this list, but it's because that came out in a year where I've got something even higher up. But Part 2 I actually do enjoy a little more. I think I have more fun watching it. When I was a teenager and I had my own room and I had my own TV and my own VCR in my own room, I would actually have Back to the Future Part 2 on at night and I would go to sleep to it. So I've got the entire movie memorized just by osmosis. I was a weird kid. Moving on. 1990, Tremors. Again, I've done a whole video on it, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. It's a great movie. 1991, The Rocketeer. Now this is one I've got to get a video out soon because they're doing a sequel on Disney+. Fantastic movie. I love the 1940s aesthetic and the whole, like, it's not really a comic book movie, but it's kind of a comic book movie, you know? Timothy Dalton is the bad guy. It's awesome. 1992. Now here's one that, this is not a good movie, okay? I'm not going to tell you this is a good movie. But the movie I'm talking about is Free Jack. It's a bad movie. It's actually a terrible movie, but I love it. And I love to watch it, and I can't wait to do a video on it. 1993, again, this isn't exactly a great movie, but it's a fun movie. And that is Demolition Man. Now, there was another movie in 1993, and if you know your cinema history, especially your sci-fi cinema history, you know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to name it because I don't name my runner-ups. But I picked this one over that one just because this one I'm more likely to watch. Like I said before, that's my criteria. It's entertaining. It always makes me laugh. It's a great movie. I'm going to keep saying that. It's a great movie, aren't I? Okay, 1994. For this one, I decided to go with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Again, this is not a good movie. The early 90s had some really terrible science fiction movies, but movies that I still like because they're still entertaining. And Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, this is Kenneth Branagh turned up to 11. It's the most Kenneth Branagh has ever been. And I love that. And I can't get enough of it. I'm fascinated by it. This movie's kind of a train wreck, but at the same time, Robert De Niro's really good as the monster, and Kenneth Branagh is just giving it his all. It's the most 90s interpretation of Frankenstein. But yeah, I love it. It's a great movie. I'm going to keep saying it. 1995, Strange Days. This is a prophetic movie. If you've never seen it, watch it now, and you will wonder why it wasn't made like this year. Granted, it does talk about the turn of the century being in the future, which obviously it's not anymore. But other than that, the movie deals with a lot of issues that are very relevant today. And it deals with some technology that I think is still possible and could still be right around the corner. I'm not going to say anything else about that, except this is one of Ralph Fiennes' most interesting performances because it's not your typical Ralph Fiennes. You should track it down and watch it if you haven't seen it before. Strange Days, great movie. Again, great movie. 1996, Independence Day. Do I really have to talk about why this is on this list? It's Independence Day. But I will say, This is the movie that I think of when I think of, trailers that really changed everything. Actually, going back to Strange Days, that trailer was pretty cool too. But the Independence Day trailer came out so far in advance of the movie, and all it did was show you like the UFOs blowing up the White House, and that was all. That's all you knew about it, and that was enough to get everybody hyped. This was in the days like before everybody was speculating on the internet about every movie that was going to come out like in 3 or 4 years. This was mind blowing that they would show us a trailer a year out from the movie. And that really got the hype going, and man, that movie delivered, didn't it? That was that brief shining moment where Roland Emmerich was actually really good. It didn't last, but that movie, product of its time, perfect example of a great movie from 1996. 1997, Contact. Now, this is a movie that I've listed before in other places as my favorite movie of all time. Still, I'm not really sure I'd say that anymore. But it is still one of them. It's still like in my top 5. Means a lot to me. 1998. This is another contender for my favorite movie of all time, and that's Dark City. I freaking love this movie. I can't talk about it without spoiling it, but if you haven't seen it, just see it, please. 1999, Existenz. This is a David Cronenberg movie about video games. And again, I don't want to talk too much about it, but Jude Law, really good. Yeah, Existenz. 2000, Pitch Black. Again, not a great movie. There's just something about it. It's cheesy, it's stupid, it's derivative, but it's got really cool visuals. I don't know, I just really dig it. 2001, Evolution. This is kind of like Ghostbusters. In fact, this is kind of like a spiritual successor to Ghostbusters. Only it was never as successful as Ghostbusters. It's so much fun, and it's so silly, and it's so stupid, and I could watch it again and again and again. And my favorite part is that at the end it turns into, spoiler alert, just a big Head and Shoulders commercial. It's great. I know if you've never seen it, that doesn't make any sense, but if you know, you know. 2002, Equilibrium. This is a low-key choice. Because this is Christian Bale in this like really angsty dystopian future where people aren't allowed to feel emotions or read or anything like that. And Christian Bale's like this master of this kung fu called gun kata. It's very silly. It's very early 2000s. But I dig it. I dig it so much. 2003, The Matrix Reloaded. Another controversial choice. I actually didn't like the original Matrix the first time I saw it. I thought it was too derivative, and I thought that the logic of it didn't make a lot of sense when you watch the movie more than once. I still kind of feel that way about the first Matrix movie, but I have come to appreciate it over the years. But Matrix Reloaded, I liked then, and I like it now. I know a lot of people don't like the sequels, but I love them. I even love the other one, Matrix Revolutions, but Matrix Reloaded I think is even better. I love the philosophy behind it, and I love Monica Bellucci. 2004, Primer, I don't know how to pronounce it. This is probably my favorite time travel movie, and that's saying something, because I've got a lot of favorite time travel movies, but this is probably my favorite. 2005, this wasn't a great year, but Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I know a lot of people don't like the prequels, and I'm not here to tell you the prequels are good. Okay, they're not. But I think the third one is the best of the three. This is, the one where Darth Vader is born. It's Anakin Skywalker versus Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's not a perfect movie. It has some pretty deep flaws. But of the prequels, I think it's the one that's the truest to Star Wars, and I really do like it. And I will watch that anytime. I won't watch the second one. Episode 2 is terrible, but Episode 3 I will watch. I love it. 2006, Children of Men. This is a movie that kind of it was a sleeper hit. It came out of nowhere, and it's serious. It's very serious. It's about, a future where children are no longer being born, and all of a sudden there's a pregnant woman who's about to give birth. It's so good. This is Alfonso Cuarón, who has a couple movies that could have been on this list. I'm not going to mention my runner-ups. You almost got me. He's a really great director. He did the third Harry Potter, which I know a lot of people don't like for some reason, but is actually probably my favorite Harry Potter movie. This is The Prisoner of Azkaban. I think he's got a really cool visual style. He's got a really sophisticated flair. That one scene in the car, that one take scene in the car, one of the greatest action scenes of the entire early 2000s. 2007. I almost don't want to talk about this, but I will. I Am Legend. Again, this is not a good movie. This is a very flawed movie, and a frustratingly flawed movie. I don't know why Hollywood can't just adapt the book, you know? Why can't they just do that? Why do they have to change the ending every single time? They render the title meaningless. And the ending of this one is really bad. Even the alternate ending, which you can find on the Blu-ray, is also terrible. I don't like it. I want the book's ending. I really, really do. But I put this movie on here because even though the special effects are terrible, even though the plotting is a little wonky, even though I hate the ending, I love Will Smith, and I think he gives it his all. This is actually one of the best performances of his career, and I challenge anybody to argue differently. You know, not counting the movies that got him Academy Awards, whatever. Who cares about the Academy Awards, right? Am I right? 2008, we get Cloverfield. This is probably one of the best things to have ever come out of the found footage movement. You know, the Blair Witch Project changed the game. I like the Blair Witch Project, but it wasn't until Cloverfield that I really felt that the genre had matured. Is this and Wreck are the two like best found footage movies in my opinion. But this one, this is Matt Reeves. It's not a J.J. Abrams movie. Stop saying that. It's a Matt Reeves movie. He does a really good job of showing this like party atmosphere of the world like before 2001. Because let's face it, this movie's about 9/11. If you don't know that, you really need to take a couple more reading comprehension classes, because that's absolutely what this movie is about. I mean, you've got a decapitated Statue of Liberty in the heart of New York. Could it be more obvious? And the movie itself is great. I mean, even divorced from the whole 9/11 parallels, the movie is very exciting. It's a really cool take on the giant monster. Even though I'm not a big fan of the Clover monster, I know a lot of people really like it, but I thought it felt a little derivative. But whatever. Great movie. Moving on. 2009, Moon. I really don't want to talk about this because if you haven't seen, I don't want to ruin it for you. This is a fantastic little indie film from Duncan Jones, who's made a couple movies since then, but I don't think he's ever topped Moon. Yeah, if you like Sam Rockwell and you want to see him on the moon, see Moon. That's all I'll say. 2010, Tron Legacy. I love Tron Legacy, and I am very impatient with people who don't like it. This is a fantastic Tron movie. I love it. It's better than the original Tron, in my opinion. And I'm really, really hoping they finally figure out how to make Tron 3. I'm a little sad that it probably won't have a Daft Punk soundtrack since Daft Punk has broken up. But still, come on. Come on. Come on. 2011, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. This is the reboot of Planet of the Apes that kind of takes a different direction. You know, I thought it was very clever to start here instead of starting in the future and trying to retell the whole Charlton Heston story again. I don't love James Franco, and I don't love him in this movie, but everything else about this movie is really cool. And I just like that it was a jumpstart to a franchise that I personally adore. And that's not the last we'll talk about it. We'll move on. 2012, Dread. Fantastic movie that needs a sequel, and Carl Urban needs to make it happen. I know he's trying his hardest, but we still don't have it. We don't even have that TV show he was talking about a few years ago. Make it happen. 2013, Pacific Rim. You know, you either love this movie or you hate it. Giant monsters fighting giant robots in what is essentially a Guillermo del Toro sports movie. Like really, if you get into the structure of the movie, it's structured exactly like a sports movie. It's great. Again, it's a great movie. I love it. 2014, Godzilla. I couldn't do this list without naming at least one Godzilla movie. And there was a couple that I almost named earlier, but the 2014 Godzilla, I think, is still the best of the whole monster verse that has sprung up in its wake. Gareth Edwards is a very underrated director who knows how to do scale, and for a Godzilla movie, that's extremely important. A lot of people are turned off because they kill Bryan Cranston early on, and I don't understand why that's a problem. It's a great movie with or without Bryan Cranston. And yeah, it's a Godzilla movie. It's great. And like, I know it cuts away from the action a lot, but if you actually like time how much Godzilla action you see in this movie, like minute for minute, it's more than most other Godzilla movies. Okay, it really is. Especially in the end. That climactic fight between the Mutos and Godzilla is, oh god, I love it so much. 2015, Ex Machina. This was a movie that surprised the hell out of me. It's a fascinating little peek at the psychology of science fiction and the philosophy of science fiction, and it's got so many surprises that I don't really want to get into. But yeah, this movie blew me away. It's one of the best science fiction movies, full stop. It doesn't even have to just be the year 2015. It's full stop. And along the same lines, we got 2016 with Arrival, another one of the greatest science fiction movies, full stop. Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, they go to this site where where aliens have arrived in a ship, and they go into the ship and they try to communicate with the aliens. And this is all about language and there's a term for it that is escaping me at the moment, where the kind of language you speak and hear and understand dictates how you think, and it takes that to like a ridiculous sci-fi extreme that is phenomenal. This is a fantastic movie. Any sci-fi buff worth his salt needs to see this movie. 2017, War for the Planet of the Apes. Now, I didn't talk about Dawn of the Planet of the Apes because there was something else that year, but War for the Planet of the Apes might be my favorite Planet of the Apes movie. And I'm including the original Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes when I say that. This movie is incredible. This is, I think, Matt Reeves' magnum opus. If he ever tops this, I will be impressed. But wow, this movie's good. 2018. Okay, we finally get to my one and only comic book movie on this list. I could have easily turned this into an MCU love fest and talked about every MCU movie as my favorite sci-fi movies, although there were more than a couple every year, so it wouldn't have been possible. But Avengers Infinity War is definitely my favorite sci-fi movie from 2018. And it's probably my favorite Avengers movie. I know, a lot of people think Endgame is better, but there's just something about this one. Endgame kind of rubs me the wrong way. I'm too much of a time travel purist, and I hate that it talks down to you being like, accept these rules or you're stupid. You think Back to the Future's time travel. I find that annoying. And I also don't think the time travel rules of Endgame make a lot of sense, and they're inconsistent, internally inconsistent, and that bugs the crap out of me. You can obey whatever time travel rules you... Why am I talking about Endgame? Anyway, Avengers Infinity War, I went into this... I saw this as a preview screening. I saw it before it actually came out, and I saw it with my wife. And she didn't know how it was going to end, but I did because I've read the Infinity War comics. I've read the Infinity Gauntlet, and I suspected I knew exactly how this movie was going to end, and I was absolutely right. I didn't know they were going to like kill Spider-Man. Spoiler alert, but I did know it was going to end on a very down note. Especially since I knew there was a sequel coming out a year later, right? And I still have the bruise from when my wife got to the end of the movie. Anyway, 2019, Godzilla King of the Monsters. Now, this is a weird choice because it's actually my least favorite of the MonsterVerse movies. I think this one's the most flawed because the human characters are terribly written and they're awful, and I hate every single one of them, including Millie Bobby Brown. But man, for just raw monster action from a Godzilla movie and fan service, this is right up there, man. This is incredible. Also, 2019 wasn't a great year for sci-fi. I'm just gonna put that out there. So we're getting really close to the end here, so let's talk about the last movie I saw in theaters before the pandemic, and that was 2020's The Invisible Man. Now, obviously, I love The Invisible Man. I love him. And I was initially kind of put off by the fact that this was not telling that story. Not exactly. But as a horror movie, this really lays it on. Like, this is, about abuse, and you really feel like you've been abused by this horrible human being who is just toying with her the whole movie. And the idea of using cameras as like a camera suit instead of using, like a potion makes it a little more sciencey, makes it pretty cool. And there's some great beats in this movie and some really great cinematography. So, The Invisible Man. Probably easily my favorite sci-fi movie of 2020. 2021, really, there's only one movie that could be on this list, and that's Dune, obviously. Or should I say Dune Part 1? Yeah. That's the one complaint people have on it, is that it's actually just a Part 1. My only complaint is that last line from Zendaya. That's awful. But everything else about this movie I love to death, and I could talk about this movie forever, so let's just move on. Okay, this year, 2022. Now, look, I'm recording this in April. I've only been to the theater like a handful of times, and I don't think I've seen any sci-fi movies yet on streaming that came out this year. So I'm just going to say The Batman. I mean, it's not really science fiction. It's a Batman movie. Wait, did I say earlier that there was only one comic book movie on this list? Ha, I lied. The Batman, we're talking about Matt Reeves again. I didn't think you could top The Dark Knight, and I'm still not entirely sure that Batman does. But it comes really close. Even if it doesn't, it comes really, really close. This is fantastic, and I think Robert Pattinson is probably the best all-around Batman. He's not a great Bruce Wayne, but because in this particular story, you don't really have a lot of Bruce Wayne. But man, what a movie. Anyway, instead of me just telling you I love it, it's great, let's end this. Those are my movies. If you like this list and you want to have other people tell you their lists of favorite movies from every year since they were born, I'm gonna make a playlist of all my friends who've done this on YouTube, and you can check there if you're not already like watching it from that playlist, which you could be, which good for you. So that's it. Bye. Oh, and never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.